right, ladies and gentlemen, there has been some news that has struck the Wuthering Waves space in the past couple of days. Only one day ago, there's been an announcement on the Play Store and probably Play Stores and maybe even PC ratings online. Wuthering Waves has now become a 16+ game. And boy, oh boy, when we dive right on into it and we see the only reason why, that's a little bit interesting. It appears it is because of nudity. And so when it comes to this whole 16+ nudity thing that's going on over here, a lot of people have had some theories. Maybe it's because of a character like Chang Li, who, you know, as she goes throughout her kit, as she builds up her Forte circuit, she starts losing clothing on her body. And when she gets to 4 stacks, like her jacket disappears, a bunch of like these articles, they all disappear, that sort of stuff. It might be because of her. Or it's because of a character like Carlotta, right? Where her resonance ability is her pulling literal rifles out of her tacit mark, which is conveniently placed right over her ass. Or it could be a character like Camellia, where her liberation animation zooms in on that tacit mark that's happening over here and gives you a nice view of the very small assets that she has. Or it could be a character like Shorekeeper, who, for a lot of people, right, doesn't look like she's wearing too much, but, you know, it is relatively tasteful. Maybe it's Jinsei, or it's Yinlin. But in reality, a lot of people are theorizing about this, which I do believe is the case. The most recent 5-star limited character that's come to the roster, Cantarella. And let's be real here, right? This character is probably the biggest example of gooner bait that we've had within Wuthering Waves. A lot of the things when it comes to this character seem to defy the laws of gravity. For example, how is this entire situation going on when she doesn't really have any of like the support that you might see in the normal day-to-day? Couple of question marks that might be occurring in your head. However, there's been some research done by what I would call probably the most degenerate part of the Wuthering Waves community. There's been some research done, perhaps there were some reports made to all the Google Play stores, and that is, well, not what's going on up here. It's actually what's going on. And I feel so odd doing this. It's something that's going on down here. I've got some historical articles. I've got some glue. I'm not taking an angle like this of this character for no reason at all. I'm doing it for a pretty damn good one. They've actually got some detectives in the Wuthering Waves subreddit. They have some actual detectives in the Wuthering Waves subreddit. And ladies and gentlemen, here are the results of their findings. They removed Cantarella's camel toe. So yesterday, April 8th, I saw a meme about a specific detail in Cantarella's design and I checked it out. But today, April 9th, I noticed that they've unfortunately removed that detail. What do you think about this? And they've got the before picture and they've got the after picture. And the after picture, right, is literally what we have in the game. My saturation's like a little bit high. I'm actually getting blinded by it. I should probably change those settings later. And that's the current state of the game. But this is the thing, ladies and gentlemen. This was kind of just like a fabric seam that you find on a lot of pieces of clothing. It was kind of like approaching the design barriers and like the rating barriers that would lead it to, you know, going from a 12+ game to a 16+ game. But in reality, right, when you have games like Nikke, and I don't even think I need to show footage from a game like Nikke for you to know what I'm talking about. Nikke is still a 12+ game. You have games like Brown Dust 2, which are pretty much way more gooner, being 12+. Snowbreak is 12+. And of course, ZZZ, one of the most gooner games of them all, is 12+ as well. And so with all that in mind, I do believe that there has been some pretty active censoring done in the game to possibly contest the 16+ rating. We do have to keep in mind, though, that gacha games as a whole probably should just be 18+ in the first place, regardless of any of the stuff going on, because they got gambling in them. There's been more updates made in the most recent patch, which I do believe is the attempt to bring this rating down back to 12+, and that's been changes to fleur-de-lis. As you're all familiar, this boss had some pretty spicy. This weekly boss had some pretty spicy clothing below the waist. And now she's a bit more covered up. I do believe there's going to be another comparison that's going to be made over here to what it looked like prior to this patch and prior to this update. Before, she did have like a bit of like a leotard swimsuit looking thing going on over here. And now we've got an after in terms of the censorship. And a lot of people, they might be upset with this, right? A lot of people, they might not be too happy with what's going on. A lot of people, they play games for different reasons. And it's pretty clear that Wuthering Waves has introduced a lot of pretty spicy stuff in patch 3.2, and now they're going ahead and perhaps rolling back some of those more ambitious design decisions. When we think about Wuthering Waves as a whole, it is like a very story-based game where you're going out doing a bunch of different things. There are so many different types of characters, some relatively mature storylines. And we have to think about it in this way. There's not that much in the game that would warrant a 16 plus rating other than those designs. And so it is pretty much, in my opinion, the take. When you consider games like Genshin Impact, their designs didn't go this crazy. I do believe that Wuthering Waves had a little bit more freedom. Maybe they didn't have as much of like a, they definitely don't have as wide of a player base as Genshin Impact. And as a result, people felt a little bit more, maybe the developers over at Kuro Games felt a bit more comfortable pushing the barriers of what they were able to put in. But unfortunately, after the 3.2 update, it appears that the game has either been mass reported. It appears that the game might have been brought to the attention of certain authorities over at the Play stores. And fortunately or unfortunately, depending on which side you are of the conversation, well, all of that has changed. Stop saying 3.2. Sorry, I meant 2.2. And so at this point, we do have footage of the older ones. We do know what the past is compared to the present, but I do believe that this is going to set a bit of a new precedent for Wuthering Waves. I do believe that this means that what we're seeing on the right over here is going to be the norm moving forward, but I don't necessarily know if that's really going to be a huge issue. We can clearly see that a lot of the designs in the game before weren't really on Cantarella's level. A lot of the designs in the game were already, somewhat a little bit more on like the conservative side. And I'm doing this, again, entirely for research and comparative purposes. This is Jinxi's skin. That was released back in version 2.0. And Jinxi's skin has sort of like been like this the whole time. She doesn't... Okay, again, this is just for research purposes. She doesn't really have like, she's kind of wearing like the same kind of like spats that you would see on like Fleur de Lis. You can see like over here, she's basically got like some pants on. And so this isn't really something that like Kuro Games has like super leaned into in terms of their design. And I do think that they were pushing the buttons a little bit in 2.2's update. I do think that they were pushing the buttons pretty significantly in the 2.2 update. And unfortunately, Icarus flew a little bit too close to the sun. Icarus did fly a little bit too close to the sun. The wings melted, and now we're heading back down to Earth. So when it comes to this 16 plus Play Store rating and the nudity reasoning that we're seeing over here, I don't think it's because of any of the existing character designs. I don't think it's because of any of like those other theories that people might have had with like a dark story or any of those other issues. I really do think it's because of this boss, and we're probably going to see when and if Cartethyia releases. If she does have this form, it's probably going to be in the similar censored sort of way. And when it comes to Cantarella, right, even though it is pretty much just fabric, it kind of did lean a little bit too much into, something that might deserve 16 plus. And so, yeah, there's a lot of negative press. There is a lot of potential, stigma associated with the game that's going to be 16 plus. We all know that Wuwa is approaching its anniversary very, very, very soon. It's approaching its new Steam launch extremely soon with that anniversary. And I'm sure they're trying to avoid as much negative PR as possible and, get that whole impression that Wuwa is a Gooner game, blah, 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 all of that, and the negative stigma associated with that out of the way before they get into, right, some of their biggest releases ever, some of their most popular characters. When we look at the designs of characters like Zani and Kachona, they're, let's be honest here, a lot more conservative compared to what we already have on the roster. So, yeah. You can say, oh, 16 plus was perfectly fine anyways. You have to sign something saying you're 16 plus in Wuwa. The timeline is a fact. Wuwa turned to 16 plus in global in the NA stores and the EU stores, and then Kuro rolls out a censorship patch a day or two later. And that's kind of just it. It's pretty clear, and I can say with 95% certainty, these devs want that rating turned back to 12 plus. Hopefully that paints a clearer picture of why some of these updates are being made. I don't think that Kuro wanted the game to be 16 or 18 plus. I don't think that that's necessarily the vibe that they're going for. This means that people are far less likely to download and play the game. This really keeps the game a lot more out of reach for what Kuro might think is like their target audience moving forward. And getting this rating back down to a 12 plus, even though all gacha games really should be 18 plus, is probably what Kuro is going for over here. And when we do keep in mind that, again, games like Nikke, games like Brown Dust 2, games like Snowbreak, and games like ZZZ are already still at 12 plus, that's probably where we need to, you know, we got the proof over here of Brown Dust 2 being 12 plus. That's probably where we do want Wuwa. We don't want Wuwa to be the only game that's 16 or 18 plus in an industry where even the spiciest games, right, with the craziest character designs and the most absurd jiggle physics are still 12 plus. Don't blame Kuro Games if you're in that boat of players. Don't blame Kuro Games. Blame whoever was mass reporting this game to the Play Store. And you might know the parties involved when it comes to that. Let me know what you all think. Peace.